Namaskaram everyone. Warm welcome. My apologies. We had a small technical problem, so we took a while to get the Zoom meeting started. Thank you all for being here. I welcome every one of you on behalf of Natana Kairali. So I'm going to make my introduction very, very brief. So what we are planning to have over the next few months are a series of lectures on the topic of Hasta Mudra. So my father, who is also the founder chairman of Natana Kairali, Guruji Venu, has in fact spent a large part of his life studying the gestures specifically of Kerala, various art forms of Kerala, mainly Kathakali, Kudiyattam, Mohiniyattam and Mohiniyattam. And he has devised a system of notation to document gestures and movement. And so now he is in the process of publishing his biggest work, which is a compilation of all the collections of notations of hand gestures that he has made over several decades. So before the book comes out, we planned this series of talks going deeply into each gesture based on the Hasta Lakshana Deepika, and just to give you as much information about each gesture that Venuji has gathered from his lifelong research and study. So this is our series, and today is the first day. And today we have with us a very dear friend, Shireen Saif, who is a dancer, an actor, an acclaimed award-winning actor, a storyteller. And she's also, over the past few years, been a very close associate. She has been a participant at, it started off as she being a participant of the Navarasa Sadhana workshop. But then she went on, we kept in touch, and she's also writing about about Venuji's research. But today she's here to give an introduction to Guru Venuji's work on gesture, followed by a talk on the gesture Pataka, the very first gesture according to the Hasta Lakshana Deepika by Guruji Venu. So without much delay, a very warm welcome to Shireen. Thank you always for being with us whenever we need your presence. Most welcome, Shireen.
Thank you so much, Kapila. That's such a warm welcome, and it feels like home. And it is a privilege and a real honor to do this introduction for my Guru, Venuji, as he begins this series. I have made a little presentation actually. It's a short one, but in this presentation, I'd like to give you an overview of the history of mudras in general. And we'll also dig deeper into Venuji's specific contribution to the notation system of mudras. So this is what I've planned as a prequel to what Venuji will be going through. As Kapila said, we'll be going through Pataka today. I've also had the honor and the great privilege to read the manuscript of Mudra, Venuji's magnum opus that is gone to print. And I will also share maybe a story or two from that wonderful book. So this is what I've planned. I'm going to pull up, I'm going to try and share my screen. What I plan to do is give you a very brief overview of the history and origin of mudras, and in specific Venuji's contribution to the study of codified hand gestures of mudras. Let's start right here. So the fact of the matter is, gestural communication predates spoken language. Now, before the spoken and the written word, as humans, we communicated through gestures, and there's no doubt about it. We communicated through hand gestures and body language. And it was not just us who communicated through gestures. This is very common in the animal world, particularly when it comes to our predecessors, the chimps. And in fact, researcher and primatologist Franz de Waal and Amy Pollock studied chimps for many, many years. They videoed them, they studied how they speak, and interestingly, they identified more than 30 distinct gestures, such as waving, or even you can see what the second chimp is doing. He's extending his arm out, asking. So it's an asking gesture. So this has always been there in the animal world. We've learned it from our predecessors. However, we have developed it further as a very complex and aesthetic language that we use for multiple things. Now, the origin of mudras itself, or the origin of codified hand gestures, the actual origin of it remains a mystery. So how did we move from simple hand gestures to something more complicated, like what you see on the screen, for ritual meditative practice, or gestures used for communication and expression? And they're two completely different worlds of usage of gestures or mudras. The mudras are not just found in Asia, but throughout the entire world. However, Asia, in particular India, Tibet, China, Southeast Asia, countries where Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism flourished, the mudras were developed into a very, very complex language. They were used not just to commune with gods, and that's where it began as ritualistic mudras, to commune with gods, but also try and get an internal focus through the use of meditation mudras. And also they started to develop on a parallel line for use in performance, in classical art forms, from dance to drama to sculpture to painting. Let's now take a look at mudra and how these ideas have changed. The word mudra has come to mean different things over many, many, many years. Seal, stamp, name of a particular position. It can mean ring or mark or image, a ritualistic gesture, token, a mark of divine attribute. It can even mean parched grain. So the idea of mudra has changed, and it has multiple meanings. But the meaning that we would like to focus on is the fundamental one. Let's go back to the basic. The word mudra is made up of two words. The root word is mud, to take delight or to rejoice, and ra is to give or to draw forth. So this implies that mudra is a symbolic hand gesture that has a power to give pleasure and produce joy. So at the heart of it, this is what mudra means. Now, mudra has multiple applications, as I've told you before. The origin started with ritualistic practice, and this involves day-to-day ritualistic devotional practice. It also means tantric practice and meditative practice. It is also used heavily in dance and theatre as a mode of communication and storytelling. Also used in iconography, so that's sculpture and painting and all of those things. And what I'd like to stress here is that mudras used for ritual practice is very different from the mudras used for communication. They reside in two very different worlds, and that needs to be made very clear at the outset. How did we come to use mudras for ritual and tantric practice or meditative practice? This comes from the idea of the hand, the human hand, or in Indian philosophy and Ayurveda and all of those practices that we have. The idea is that we are, the microcosm resides within us. We're a miniature of the universe. And the hands represents the 5 elements, or the Panchamahabhutas. And you will see that each finger is said to represent an element. So basically, by bringing these elements together, we balance the elements within, we harmonize our inside, and we allow the flow of prana. So this is the fundamental concept on which mudras rest. Ritual and meditation, as you can see, they vary from day-to-day ritual practices, and you may observe, many of you, when you practice your day-to-day ritual, we're using something like the Namaskara mudra, or we're using, some mudra where we offer things to appease the gods, or we do use a dhyana mudra to sort of, balance our mind, to calm our mind. So this is a very inward journey. So what I want to express is that when we say mudra, and specifically when it's used for ritual and meditation, we're looking at a very inward practice. It is to harmonize the inside practice, and it's also to commune with the gods. And here, it is not used as a means of expression. Let's look a little bit at iconography. Now, iconography is basically where you have these hidden symbols and mudras that are used in painting and sculpture, and any kind of 3D art or all of those things. I've picked, just to give you 4 examples. So what's significant is that iconography we see it all over the world, right? And particularly so, it's a very defined and very refined kind of a usage of mudra in the East, in Asia. And mudras are used in these works of art to convey a deeper truth that is not obvious on the external aspect of it. For example, if you look at that first picture, which is a Byzantine icon of the Christ, and you'll see the Christ holding what looks to us like the Prithvi mudra. On occasion, you may see Christ holding something that looks like the Ardha Pataka, or something that looks like this. So all of this signifies that perhaps they may have had an idea, similar ideas that the Asians had about the use of the 5 elements and balance and all of those aspects, but also that these mudras symbolized healing. Jesus Christ as a healer, and Jesus Christ healing himself as well. So some of those hidden messages there. Let's look at the second one. The second one is a Buddha statue, it's a giant Buddha statue in Hong Kong, and you will see him holding what is called the Abhaya mudra. Okay, so there's a Abhaya Varada. So we'll talk about the Abhaya mudra. The Abhaya mudra signifies protection, benevolence, peace, and also fearlessness, or rather dispelling fear. And there are many stories. There is a story in particular of Buddha having calmed a violent elephant that came towards him. He calmed the animal with just the Abhaya mudra. The third is a copper alloy chola sculpture, and this depicts Shiva as what is called the Tripura Vijaya. So basically the conqueror or the vanquisher of the 3 cities, and there's a legend that is associated with that. But I'd like to draw your attention to the mudras that he's holding. On the left, you will see him holding, and it's not like we see in dance per se, but it's a very naturalistic holding of a bow and an arrow. And then you will see the 2 symbols that are often associated with Shiva, which is the axe, the parashu, and the mriga, or the deer. And you'll see him standing in this beautiful heroic posture in a dvibhangi and holding all these mudras. And the last one that I'd like to share is a Kerala mural of the Lalita Tripura Sundari. Again, observe the mudras that she's holding. She's often considered the most prominent Mahavidya. And Kerala is the land where the Sri Vidya worship flourished, and a lot of, obviously tantric practice. And there's been a great give and take between ritual and drawing all of those ideas into performance and all of those kind of things. But here I specifically want to draw your attention to the mudras that she's holding. You will see her holding a sugarcane bow and the Panchabana. You will see a flower, it's a depiction. And then you will see the pasha and the ankusha, basically the noose and the goad. Overall, all of this together represents this idea that Tripura Sundari, who's depicted as this youthful yet motherly, this radiant goddess who has the color of the rising sun, this visual of her is a personification of supreme consciousness. So you will see how the use of these mudras mean different things, and it adds to these kind of hidden messages about deities and about icons. I will now move to the usage of mudras in dance and theatre. As I mentioned earlier, the mudras used in dance, theatre, and any expressive art is very different from what we discussed earlier. The ritual arts stand very different from the usage of mudras in performing arts. This here is pure storytelling, expressing through mudras. It is an external activity. It is not an internal activity like like what we've seen in ritual and meditation. And that needs to be made very, very clear and distinct. Interestingly, in dance, if you look at some of the old texts, the oldest texts that we have, Nadi Shastra, the Vishnu Dharmota Purana, or the Abhinaya Darpana, there is no mention of the word mudra. Mudra is not the word that is used to describe hand gestures, codified hand gestures. The word used is hastas, and we all know them. Those of you who are dancers or actors in the audience today will know that they're referred to as hastas, and we have samyuta hastas and asamyuta hastas. Then how did we start interchangeably using the word mudra and hastas? Obviously, we borrowed the word mudra. So when we say mudra, we specifically or historically mean the hand gestures that are used in ritualistic practice. So we drew that word from there and we've started to interchangeably use them. And that is how, in a way, that we use the word, and sometimes we use the conjoined word hasta mudras to describe mudras. But technically, Bharata would call them hastas. Because he distinctly wanted to keep aside ritualistic mudras, which were used for a different reason, and hastas, which were used for communication. And as I mentioned earlier, hastas were envisioned as an outward journey, as an expression, whereas mudras were considered an inward journey of a morpho ritual. I would now like to take a little while to describe the beginnings of an extraordinary journey. This is a story of an 11-year-old boy who grew up in the remote villages of Thiruvananthapuram in a place called Nedumangad. So that little boy, you may have seen this picture, it's a very famous one, it's one of my favorites. That was when Ashan started his Kalari training. And his father, Chittur Gopalan Nayarji, was a painter by practice. And when painting, or portrait painting, went out of vogue, he started photography. He's a self-taught photographer. And he, in 1950, established a photo studio. And when he realized that Ashan, Guru Venuji, had a very deep interest in Kathakali, having watched a performance, he, with his very it's not like he had large amounts of funding, but he set up a Kalari about 2 miles away from home. And they lived on this beautiful hillock in Nedumangad. And every evening after his dinner, he would walk those 2 miles and go to his Kalari. And there in the evening, after his eye exercise practice, they practiced the 24 alphabets of the mudras as per the Hastalakshana Deepika. He learned it from his guru. They sat on the floor. They had, as we practice mudras, they did that. And when he was introduced to the idea of these alphabets becoming ideas and concepts, it really fascinated him as a child. About how the pataka could mean king and elephant, and crocodile and all of these ideas. This was basically the seed of it all. That how these mudras were starting to become living concepts. And every evening as he walked from home to the Kalari, it was a very remote and sort of a beautiful landscape, but kind of desolate. And he would walk through them, and his little fingers would deftly play with these mudras, and he would make these elephants and serpents, and they all were his company as he walked to the Kalari. So this is how it all began. Later, in 1963, he joined the Vishwakala Kendra, which was founded by Guru Gopinath Ji. And that's when he really started to develop an academic interest in mudras. And he started to really see how this had a complete language. This language had a complete grammar. It was just like spoken language. And interestingly, he practiced the southern style of Kathakali, the Kaplingadan style of Kathakali. And as most of you know, today the Kathakali style that is in vogue is the Kalamandalam style. So the Kaplingadan style, he wanted to preserve that style. Plus, he was so fascinated by this language that was this gestural language that was so developed that he felt a need to notate and document them. Now, what is interesting to note is that obviously from a practice point of view, and we all know this, we come from an oral tradition, right? So you learn directly from the Guru. We don't write notes, or at least when Ashan was studying, or when Kapila was studying, I'm sure she also learned from Guru Amanur Madhava Chakyar, and they transmitted it from Guru to Shishya orally. You had to memorize it. Your body had to remember it. It was an embodied practice. There was no idea of notation. Yet, this young man had a very different idea. Obviously, he was influenced by someone as pioneering as Guru Gopinath. He comes from a family where they were painting and drawing, so he was a very visual person. So this was itself phenomenal that he thought of creating an idea to notate. And he started to read and watch films, and he had a very he drew from different things, and he was obsessed with this idea of creating a notation system. And the reason I put these two pictures together is to show where it started, this fascination. And to this day, he has this fascination with mudras. And I quickly want to take you to a rainy night in 1965. So Venuji had watched a beautiful Kathakali performance at the Padmanabha Swami temple a couple of days before this rainy night. And he'd been thinking about how to notate mudras, how do I translate what I've learned into, how do I translate it pictorially? And he sat in his father's studio. It was raining, it was pouring outside, thunder, lightning, and he sat there with his pencil and a blank piece of paper. And sometime around midnight, it suddenly came to him as a flash, this first mudra, the Pataka, and he drew it. And he drew it as you see it here, the 24 basic mudras. He started off with the Pataka, and in a matter of a few hours, he completed all the 24 alphabets. And this piece of work was made when he was about 20 years old. I'm going on to the next. I want to spend some time to talk to you about his system of notation. Now, I also wanted to say a little bit about continue his journey, basically. So after he made this notation system, before I go into that, after he made this notation system, he kept it with him, and he started to notate the mudras that he was learning in class. And when he notated about 300 mudras, he finally had the courage to show it to his Guru, Guru Gopinath, who suggested that he show it to the doyen of the Kaplingadan style of Kathakali, Guru Chenganur Raman Pillai. And from there on, he met many, many mentors who gave him a lot of sort of constructive criticism and ideas and reinforcement. And the greatest reinforcement was when he met K.C.S. Panikar, the abstract painter who was considered the Picasso of India back in those days. And when he got a reassurance from K.C.S. Panikar ji that this abstract notation system conveys everything you want to convey, he had the confidence to build on his work. And in fact, this delineation system that I'm about to share was something that he developed by himself. I'm going to explain a little bit, just go very quickly over the system. So other than the gestures, obviously the hand, if you see this, it'll have the three different views. The cross indicates the palm, so basically this view, and the profile view. But that is not enough to communicate in detail how the mudra is being used to convey ideas. So obviously we have to look at the direction of the palm, and you will see pictorially what that represents. You will see there are 12 different directions of the palm, and then other different sort of details of it. So direction of the palm, wrist movements. So each of these represent different wrist movements. For example, the one at the bottom left would mean a circular wrist movement going inward or outward. And these are the finger movements. So for example, the one that looks like a little spiral is, for example, what, when we do this to represent color. So he'd thought about all of these details. Then other symbols, for example, if you have to use twin movements, so he developed some other symbols to make his notation system quite and easy to follow. And then combination, for example, if you see here, this would mean beginning with the Hamsa Paksha Mudra. As you can see, it's on profile, and the palm is facing outward vertically, and gradually closing the palm, beginning with the little finger. So you will see how detailed it is, a complete graphic symbol of this instruction, which he worked out on his own. I want to share this with you because I think this is an extraordinary piece of work that was published in 2013. So the Ramayana Samkshepam, as many of you may know, is the exposition of the Ramayana through hand gestures alone. So almost all of the Kudiyatam mudras are learnt by learning the Ramayana Samkshepam. So everything is covered through that. And Guru Venu studied it directly from his Guru Amanur. And I wanted to share these two. This is basically, you'll see this, these two segments, which is literally the first or the opening verse of the Ramayana Samkshepam. I want to show you how his notation system works. Okay, so the first phrase or the opening phrase of the Ramayana Samkshepam is Engilo Pandu Suri Vamsham Undai. Okay, so to represent that, you will have once upon a time, so it's 1, 2, and 3, which, as you can see, has details, and it has the staff, okay, which divides the body into 3 different parts. So the top part, and as you know, all of the mudras appear in this sphere, right? So it shows you where, and you will see the eyes. You can see other little details as well, where the eyes are. So when you're thinking, and then it goes down. So you can see the level of detail that he's gone into to express once upon a time. Okay, that's actually 3 movements. Okay, and then after that is Surya, and then you say Vamsham, and then the last one is Undai. Okay, so that's literally that one phrase. He has notated the entire Ramayana Samkshepam. It has taken him 3 years to do it, and in 2013 this was published as a bilingual work. I also want to add, you will not realize the amount of physical effort that has gone into notating something like this. He didn't use any fancy drawing implements. All he had was a coin and a pen, a pencil, paper, and just a very simple ruler. All of the dots that you see, for example, in the head, you can see all these sort of stippling kind of work that you see. It was all done painstakingly, point by hand, all of it. So that is why it takes a very, very long time, and it is literally his life's work, and a lot has gone into it. And I wanted to share this with you so that you understand how long it's taken, how much manual labor has gone into this. Not just the creative thinking, and he did it all himself. And I think that's extraordinary. What is extraordinary is this was not the only work he did, right? So basically, he also did many other things. He revived art forms, many art forms that were on the verge of extinction. He popularized Kudiyattam all over the world. So there were many other projects that he was involved in, but this Mudra project has been with him for many years. And he has notated mudras for Kathakali, Mohiniyattam, and Kathakali, and Kudiyattam. So I was just sharing like some parts from the books that he has published, and they've published several books. This one's a page from the language of Kathakali, and you'll see that the usage in Kathakali is very different from this. Although all Kerala art forms follow the Hassan Lakshana Deepika, how we use the mudras are very different in all the three forms. And this book here, Mohiniyattam, the Last Year Dance, published in 1995, was co-authored with his wife and my guru, Nirmala Panikar, from whom I have studied mudras. I finally want to leave you with this. So these are the three main books that were out, but there are many editions of this book in both English and Malayalam. In 1968 is when this thing was first published as Alphabet of Gestures in Kathakali. In 1977 was when the first sort of Kathakali Lekkai Mudragal was published by Kerala Sangeeta Natika Academy. Then several other publications followed, and a unique distinction has been that in 1986, Venuji's mudra notation was featured in the 400 Years of Dance notation, which was held. It was held at the Grolier Club in New York, and his notation system was the only one from Asia, which is quite a distinction. So all of this work, everything that he's done over the last 40 years more, is being compiled together in this magnum opus, which is about to release in a few months, called Mudra, and it's the world's largest compilation of hand gestures from the Kerala traditional performing art forms, and it compiles everything that he's done in Kathakali, in Kudiyattam, and Mohiniyattam, and it's a total of 1,341 mudras. And we're all very excited to see this book in print soon. And I thank you for listening to my introductory talk, and I'm excited to hear what Venuji has to say about the first mudra that he ever notated, the Pataka, and he's going to give you a little bit more in-depth knowledge of each mudra over a series of talks. So I hand over to Kapila.
Thank you so very much, Shireen, for this for wonderful introduction, and to just set the context and for the rest of today's talk. Thank you so very much, and over to Guruji Venu.
Thank you, Shireen, for the excellent work and the great effort you have taken to study very minutely the notation system and also the whole history of mudra. I thought before as Kapila was already informed, that before the release of the book, because the book Mudra is, first of all, it is recorded in a notation system. Usually people, there is a saying that, oh, notation, It's very difficult to understand. You have to study again mudra and the notation. So that is not the actually from the beginning, because when I was evolving the system, I was a very average student of anything. I'm not a very intelligent or anything like that. So I have evolved a system which is completely understandable to common ordinary students. So that's the reason, there are many notation systems in the world. And when I met one of the famous dance notations in London, then I told that I have published 11 editions of my notation. She can't believe how can it be possible. Usually it remains only in the libraries and for reference, this thing, but it is now very popular. Many people, even people who do some popular dance dramas and all, whenever they meet me, they come and say, "Sir, we are using your book." So many Malayalam editions have been published. For understanding any mudra, we use your book. So thank you so much. So many people say like that. So once again, she's my student Shireen, and she's working with me also in the Navarasa Sadhana. We are trying to bring out a book on it together. So I'm very grateful to Shireen for in a few short notice, you could present a reasonably serious presentation. Now, today I wanted to speak about Pataka. Pataka is the first basic hand gesture in Hasta Lakshana Deepika. Hasta Lakshana Deepika is a treatise actually composed sometime, we do not know, it is an anonymous work and very few pages of it. But it's very, very great effort behind it. The person who really composed it, and he showed exactly how you should approach a particular subject. Gradually, I understood that he has studied Kuriyatam, the existing tradition of Kuriyatam, Kathakali, and all the other forms of dances in the region of Kerala. And then only he made an attempt to record this in like Natya Shastra, following Natya Shastra, naming the basic mudra and then Vinyogas. We were never having a tradition of naming the mudra. Influence came from Natya Shastra actually. And even my guru, Amanu Mahaswekar says, when I say Pataka, Mudra, he says, no, don't use all this. I don't know anything. I have not studied. The same attitude when I spoke to Guru Changanu, Ramampule, he also said, don't tell me all this Pataka, Mudra, I don't know. What I have studied this very, when Guruji do a sun mudra, the Pataka is a perfect Pataka. I have this same experience in Kathak also. Several decades ago, Kathak Kendra of Delhi organized a Hastak on Kathak. That was a time when all the great exponents of Kathak were there. So Burj Maharaj was the director of the workshop, and all the Kathak people came from all over India. Actually, somebody has, I think Maya Rao from Bangalore, she was having a serious doubt about which treatise the Kathak Mudras belong to. So she was doubtful whether maybe it is Abhinayadava. So she has copied all those Ananda Kumaraswamy's editions, illustrations, and some other editions also. She made an exhibition of all these gestures. Kathak is so beautiful. The beauty of Kathak is that it is not doesn't restrict to any of these established mudras. The whole body energy come to the hand. Because I have seen so many Abhinaya of Shambhu Maharaj ji, still it is in my memory. Mudra to be, you're all, most of them are actors and dancers. Mudra to be taken very much care in every aspect. Like, sometimes, like Hussein Deniz was a pioneer of presenting, introducing Indian dance to Indians, American dancer. She go to different countries, India also she visited. And she stayed in India about 6 months and made some dance Indian theme and in her own way of creative dancing. And those days, Indian dance in 1926 and all, Indian dance were not allowed to perform in an opera house or any major auditoriums. But because she is an American dancer, she was allowed. So in Calcutta Opera House, she was performing Nach. And Tagore has seen first time Indian dance. It is a Hussein Deniz. But what is speciality in her is the hands. There are many photographs. Every dancer should study how beautiful the hands. The whole personality, the hand comes so effective. Nowadays, I think more and more restrict the teaching restricted with the particular slogan, this slogan, misinterpretation, all these things. The beauty and this whole power of the gesture is getting lost. What I want to say, when I was studying mudra, this is the first one. Padaka, Mudrakyam, Kadakam, Mushti, Kartari Mugam, Shugatunda, like the 24 basic gestures are there, but Pataka is the first one. And this is the Pataka. So a question came into me, how come this mudra become Pataka? Because in the Natya Shastra there is Pataka, Abhinaya Purana there is Pataka. Even the Kerala treatise, Balinam, Bharadam there is Pataka. But all those Patakas are different. They are like that, this finger straight and the thumb journey. This is the Pataka. And then with this position, they say, bend the ring finger. So this is Tripataka. Scholars say that, okay, Tripataka of Natya Shastra become Pataka of Hastarashna Devika. No. I should say there is a great difference. There is a great difference because this hand and this hand is so different. We have only 5 fingers and 5, 5 and 10, and we have to communicate so much of ideas. So energy of the fingers, energy of the palm, energy of the whole body, energy of the concept of the idea, and the position of the finger is very important. So Hastarashna Devika author says, Namida Anamiga is here. He doesn't say how to keep the hand. Don't give any instruction. Only bend the ring finger. That's all. So it's so wonderful. Bend the ring finger, and all the other things are normal. So that is the greatest thing. He never said that make all the other fingers straight or the thumb, base, nothing. Then the character of the mudra change. Here when these fingers are normal, having the energy of what is usually the energy of the body extending to the finger, so that is the thing. So this is only bend the ring finger, that is the only instruction given to yourself. So if you go to Natya Shastra, Abhinaya Darpana, Balna Bharatam of Kerala or any other this thing, Pataka, looks same. Scholars, when they make comparative study, they say, Nakshastra also have Pataka, Kerala has certainly also have Pataka. They compare with the names only. Names are just to identify a hand gesture. It has nothing to do with the whole concept of the mudra. That comes with this kind of open palm and then the ring finger. Then how it should be done with a lot energy, it depends on what kind of which subject you are doing it. So this is very, very important when you study mudra. So my search was to find out where from this pataka came, especially where this is the first mudra. Where from the idea of bringing this into the first mudra, first basic mudra. I use the term mudra because in Kerala, by the time Kerala performing arts started using mudra, hands, we started calling the mudra only. Because, as Shireen was mentioning, this our Srividya ritual becomes so popular in Kerala that it is just gone beyond caste and upper class and lower class. It is, in fact, it was more on the lower class, Srividya worship. The Dashamudra and all this mudra time came very popular in Kerala. Whereas Bharata, as Shri was mentioning, it is he used only Hasta. Bharata and Abhinav and all these people, they are great sages. They knew how important every bending and every touch of a mudra when they come to Tantra mudras. They don't want this Natya mudra to have any concept according to tantric gestures because that is altogether different. In Natya, mudras are used to communicate purely for communication. So my understanding of mudra and my research was altogether different. This thing, it is beyond the timing and all. When I started notating, I was only 19 years old. Then gradually, slowly understanding and searching that how it became a pataka and this and asking people like that, I come. Ultimately, I come into a reference of Karadipika. Karadipika, there was a treatise called Karadipika. And what we have now, we don't have the copy of the work. It's so interesting and so different because it is the only reference now available is Mathur Kunjurla Panikar, one of the greatest of Kappingaran style of Kathakali. Great person. Actually, when Mahavi Vallathol has seen him in 1925, he decided that Kunjapillai will become the chief guru of Kerala, and he invited him. And Kunjapillai he is from the Kuttanad of Kerala, southern district. And his disciples only Guru Kunjapillai, even Tota Shankaranamburi, who became the guru of Udayashankar, and Kirikattu Kochavelipillai, one of the greatest genius of Kathakali, is a performer, and Guru Gopinath, Changanarampilla, and all these leading performers, all somehow or other kind of disciples of Mathur Kunjurla. He wrote a book in 1926. That is the book he mentioned. It's a very small book, it's a very small book. The whole book is written in the poetical language. And Mudra, by the time when he wrote and published this book, Vasarthidivya was already popular in Kerala. Because by the time Vasarthidivya came out in print, definitely he must be aware of it, but he avoided it. he wanted to establish that there was Karadevika. He says about Pataka. Pataka not as the first, Karadevika doesn't bring Pataka as the first hand, but as a fourth one. But there he says, Nallor Aniviral Pagudi Madaki. Aniviral, the ring finger should be bent. Other fingers you can make it straight. And then he says, the greatest revealing aspect is, he says, Ushavadiye Nadavatu. Ushavadi means sun. They actually show with this sun. Not all the usages are given by Tardivika because Tardivika is not available. Only Mathur's book quoted these aspects, and so we knew only that. But it is a revealing thing, and he says sun should be shown. Because none of this Tripataka, if we take the shape of Vinogara, this is Natyashastra Tripataka, whether Natyashastra or Abhinaydarpana or any treatise for this mudra, they don't mention sun. But Karadevika mentioned Pushavadi, sun can be shown. So that is itself is a great answer. So the sun becomes, how come Suryo Raja, how come Hasratadevika says sun, the king, as the first usages of Hasratadevika? Because the Hasratadevika author has studied Puriyatam. In Puriyatam, there is a Attaprakaram. Puriyatam is a Sanskrit theatre. But all the acting techniques, everything is in the regional language. They are called Attaprakaram. So there is an Attaprakaram for Ramayana. Ramayana story. It is in a typical language of the hands. They follow. If you by heart it, it is very easy to do it. That's it is a storytelling. It's very important because in whole of India and the world, I can say, there is no Vinyogas. Everybody says Natyashastra and all other treatises. But where from this Vinyoga come, we understand only if there is a Attaprakaram acting manual available. So here is the acting manual available. That is Ramayana Samksheva. The whole Ramayana story can be narrated through mudra. And Puriyatam, it is taught like that. Through mudra. Mudra learning is through Ramayana Samksheva, learning of Ramayana Samksheva. Starting with as Shireen was narrating, that Engropanda Suryavamshamandai. Once upon a time, there existed a Sun dynasty. The first gesture come the sun. The sun gesture came. Then the next sentence, Avade Anegam Rajakkanmarundai. There existed several kings. The second gesture is the king. Yes. So Hasratadevika says, Suryo Raja, the Vinyogas of Pataka, came from the Ramayana Samksheva. Ramayana Samksheva never say this is Pataka or Mudrakya or any name. Even Amanyu Mahasakar doesn't know any name. Whenever I write notation, I used to write the name. He says, don't show me. I don't want to listen to your names. But his Pataka is the most powerful Pataka and most, I have taken several video and photographs. Perfect Pataka. He has no doubt. When he shows with his finger the sun, it is only this, the whole energy comes from the sun. I do his fingers. Whether the finger is bent up to this or this, all depending on it, they are not bothered. It is the whole energy given by the body. So that is the kind of how a gesture is important. As I mentioned, earlier dancers like Hussein Dennis, they knew very little gestures. But if you see their photographs, they made it so powerful. Their gesture becomes so powerful, so striking, and that is the greatest success of their, because they have not studied repeatedly, made their hands go into artificial way of distorting. So this is the Pataka, and when in the Kuriyatam this thing, the sun is that the rising sun, then the midday sun. Then the whole energy of the sun. These three aspects have come to. This come only when you learn Ramayana Samsheva Antapakara. Surya Vamsham. Then അവിടെ അനേകം രാജാക്കന്മാരുണ്ടായി. See, the king. So I have always a feeling this mudra gives so much energy. It is not only the sun and king, but any time when you hold Pataka, you live energized. How? I don't know. I always think that this is the king of our traditional mudras. Pataka is the king of mudras. That much importance I feel for Pataka. So many things like the sun is the first mudra. Then the king which he is showing is the Ramayana, the Rama's dynasty, Suryavamsha. So the sun mudra influenced for the creation of the king, because they belong to the same tradition. Suryavamsha, the kings of the sun dynasty. So you can see this sun, how much for one mudra and the king. The origin is from the sun. Then with that we can find a lot of relationships like that. From the sun, it is the sun only, it is a day, one circle of the sun. And so many ideas in Saraswati Vika, there are plenty of ideas given for the Pataka alone. I just give you one idea of how a mudra originates. Like going with Pataka, this is the going. First of all, this movement came from lots of influence from the surroundings. The snake is considered to be the most beautiful moving creature. Going is always an imitation of the snake's movement. Then it becomes a movement for the whole going as a concept. So when you show this hand and then afterwards you follow with your eyes this person moving forward. Now, another gesture developed from Pataka is the earth. Earth, then people. Because the earth and people who live on the earth. So that is a connection. Same padatha. The earth and people who live on the earth. There the bhava change. But very abstract. They keep it very abstract. Then from the king, the palace. This is for the king, and the palace become like this. This, you describe a big mansion, this, then this. This is a palace. Like that, so many different gestures. The cloud in Kathakali, the cloud, and from there the thunderbolt, and so many such kind of connections in the mudras. So Pataga is very important hand gesture. And that's the reason they made it as the first basic hand gesture of Asarashla Deepika. Asarashla Deepika's Kuriyatam doesn't follow Asarashla Deepika actually. Traditionally, they don't consider this as a scientific thing because that is not compiled only for Kuriyatam. The person who worked on it was very clever that he studied everything and compiled this thing, and it's an incomplete work. Let's say the author is, name of the author is not there. It's not written down. And, but he has minutely studied. We come across several things. Korean people nowadays, they misunderstood it as if it is written for Kuriyatam, and they even changed some of the traditional hand gestures according to this treatise. But that's all, it's not necessary actually. Kuriyatam is having still a very powerful system of hand gestures. But Mohiniyattam is highly beneficial by Asarashla Deepika. That is our work, is the greatest result of our work. Because when we started working in Mysore and Nirmala, actually none of these exponents, gurus, doesn't have a clear idea about whether the Mohiniyattam gestures are based on Abhinadarpana or Asarashla Deepika. So we already notated several what we did, that we notated at that time, in 1979 onwards, 4 years, we have notated all those existing repertoire of Mohiniyattam. And then Nirmala went for an additional training at Kerala Kalamandalam and was under the training of Satyabhama teacher, and she brought all the new developments in Mohiniyattam. So together we did a wonderful documentation. That was the beginning. We produced several volumes in Mohiniyattam gestures. That was the base of the what is today's Mohiniyattam. These are things I want to say just as an introduction, but of course, from the my age is not good memory. Sometimes I Shireen can remember so many things I cannot. So this is what I want to say as just an introduction. I want to introduce every gesture in several different series of talks. That will be really useful. Thank you so much.
It was a great opportunity for me sitting at Myrtle Beach in North Carolina and attending this. I'm grateful to him for allowing me to join the Zoom meeting. And I loved the introduction by Shireen. She was absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. And my pranams to Venuji.
Thank you so much, Manjari ji. So lovely to see you after a long time.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank
I'm
you.
also here. Paul. Yes, Paul is here. Greeting everybody. Right, Shireen, Venuji, Kapila, and all others. I was a little bit late to join because of some other occupations. But I I could catch with Shireen's well prepared, schematically, systematically prepared presentation. Congratulations for that. And also the explanation or the discussion on Pataka by Venuji is very educative. I don't know how many of our dancers know this. Of course, I know personally how much or the very history of his notating all these things and how many times I have written. Recently also, I think I have written somewhere about the pains taken by him to notate all these mudras, because if my memory is right, when he was sent to learn Kathakali, his interest was, he was always thinking, how can I notate this? How can I draw this, all these mudras? He has told me, and yet even this book he has written it. And now, when the book carrying 1,314 or so, isn't it, mudras of Kathakali, Kuriyattam, and Mohiniyattam, it will be a historic event, and we have to celebrate it. The the release of the book has to be properly conducted. I won't say should be online, but let us do it on behalf of the Academy or Kalamandalam or some cultural organization that is interested to do it, so that it must be a great event, and I'm sure it will take place in the region, the future. I mean, the next future. I request Venuji to organize such a, because he's a very good organizer also. As a critic, how many times I have written that artists are poor organizers, but Venuji is an exemption. He can organize very well, and of course, he is an artist par excellence. Thank you, everyone. And also thanks to Venu and Kapila. And Shireen, I am watching you after, I am seeing your face after how many years? Thank you for the wonderful speech. The presentation was very, very unique and very useful to everyone. Thank you, everyone.
On behalf of everyone at Natana Kairali, I thank you all for joining. So we're going to continue with these short talks. We're going to take 1 or 2 gestures each day. So the next will be Mudrakhyam. We will announce the dates
Hello.
very soon. Thank you once again for joining.